The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
After years of living and working in Rome, Deborah Johnson returned to the United States and settled in Columbus, Mississippi. In short order, Johnson has published 2 novels, The Air Between Us, the story of 2 physicians, one black, one white, in fictional Revere, Mississippi, and The Secret of Magic. This most recent novel begins with the murder of a returning black war hero in Aliceville, Alabama in 1945. The offices of Thurgood Marshall of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in New York City are notified, and a young black attorney, Regina Robichard, travels to Revere to seek justice. She finds in Mississippi a world unlike anything she had ever known. I spoke with Deborah Johnson at the studios of Alabama Public Television in Montgomery, Alabama. Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you and I have never met before, but I have certainly enjoyed your novels.
Thank you.
We are sitting here in the middle of Alabama, in the heart of Dixie, and neither one of us is a Southerner.
No. Though I feel like one, I have to say.
Well, after all these years here, I'm starting to too. But since you've not been on this program before, our viewers are curious, where did you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What happened as a child?
Well, when I was little, I was actually born below the Mason-Dixon line in Missouri.
Uh-huh.
But we moved to Nebraska when I was like 3 years old. My father went to school there, and I grew up there. And I went to Catholic schools. I had a lovely education. I loved the nuns who taught me. And I had really a happy life, you know. Then went to school. And I moved to San Francisco, got married, went to Lone Mountain College, and that's it. You know, it was
What?
just.
I don't know that school.
Well, it's part of the it was part of the nuns. It was a school of the nuns who raised me, who were the Religious of the Sacred Heart, and it was a girls' school at the time, as most of their schools were. But it was later incorporated into the University of San Francisco, which is Jesuit.
Ah, so how long were you in San Francisco? For a while altogether, then, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there for about 11 years.
Oh, that is a long time.
Happily there.
It's a beautiful place.
It is a lovely place.
Well, you left it for arguably a lovelier place, maybe. When did you go off to Rome to live?
I went to Rome after I had a divorce. I went to Rome and lived. I was just going, but I ended up living there for many years, 18 years, and loved it. I worked as a translator, as an editor of doctoral theses, not of content, but of the English part of them, and then worked for a while at Vatican Radio in the English-speaking Africa department. I loved it.
Had you learned Italian in college or somewhere?
Mm-mm. I picked it up, and for some reason or other, it was easy for me to pick up, considering that I'm not good at languages. I went actually to Rome because I really wanted to study Latin, and so that's what got me there pretty much originally. And so Italian came after that, but I have no facility with languages, so it's an anomaly.
Trastevere, where did you live?
Over it in Monteverde Vecchio, and also in the Aventino, the Aventine, yeah.
Yeah, you know, there's Pat Conroy tells wonderful stories about his years in Rome.
Yeah.
And the few Americans I've known over the years who have lived in Rome for a while,
Yeah.
the one thing they all talk about is how absolutely wonderful their neighbors were,
Oh,
how
yeah.
warm the Romans
Yeah.
were.
They were, actually my son went to school with his daughter at St. Stephen's.
Oh.
He was a little younger, but yeah. We were there more or less at the same time. I think he left before. I was just getting and he was leaving, but they were in school together.
Well, he tells a story about going around the piazza to the storekeepers, and some of them would weep and they would say, "We have failed you. if we had loved you enough, you would never leave.
Isn't that darling? It's true, though. Yeah, they're very dramatic, too, but wonderful. You know, it's very hard. I never could imagine not living there because I liked it so much.
Did you write fiction in Rome? Did you write your own material in Rome?
You know, the first book, The Air Between Us, I actually had that idea when I was in Rome. I wanted to write a book because it's based a lot on experiences of my father that my brother told me. So I had the idea about it, but when I moved to Mississippi, it became centered. It got its place, and I could tell the story that I wanted to tell in the background of the South.
All those years, you and I spoke briefly on the phone about Rome. Working with all those different doctoral dissertations,
Yeah.
how could you not? The temptation just to knock one out for yourself must have been enormous. No?
Well, you know, they're pretty dry, but interesting, but pretty dry. And it was mostly priests, you know, that I did this for, who had come to study at the pontifical universities, at the Gregorian and the Angelicum in particular. And a lot of them had come from countries where English was spoken, or, you know, not just but continents practically, where English was spoken, for instance, in India, various parts of Africa, but it was not the official language and was not a written language. So they just needed a little bit of help in bringing this together, but it was great. It was a wonderful experience.
I mean, there you were in Rome making a living.
Yeah, it's true.
What did you do for radio?
For the Vatican, I worked at the Vatican Radio in their English-speaking Africa, and I was like a little stringer sort of person, so I would put together shows that had value for Africa and read them on air. I did environmental ones. I did all the saints. I was just talking to my son, and he was like telling me some date, and I said, oh, the saint for that day is Saint Madeline Sophie, and he just could not believe that but I knew them all because I had to, and just, you know, various shows, like women's issues, just various issues, and it was wonderful to be there at that time because Vatican, lots of Africa English-speaking parts were still in the bush. And so we were like the second most listened to means of information after the BBC. So it was wonderful. You could see things change if the radio sort of paid attention to it, like women's genital mutilation, you know, just various topics that we would, child soldiers, we would take up. You could see them change.
There's no shortage of material.
No, there wasn't, yeah. But we also talked about the very positive things that were in Africa as well. So it was, you know, a wonderful experience. I made all kinds of friends.
Right. Did you broadcast in English?
Yes, we did.
You did, personally?
Yes, I did. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And and it was good. But also we were right next to the Kiswahili program for Tanzania and parts of Kenya. And then the broadcasts that went to Ethiopia and Eritrea, which were at that time at war with each other, but they were perfectly fine together over in Vatican Radio. So that was nice.
All right. There wasn't a person alive who wouldn't ask the next question. There you were, happily in Rome, earning a living, having a good time, doing useful work.
Right.
You left.
Right.
What moved you from Rome, Italy, to Columbus, Mississippi?
Well, my son had come back to the United States to go to university and was going to graduate school too, and I just didn't think that he was going to move back to Italy. As a matter of fact, he's in France now, but I, you know, at that moment I didn't think he was going to do that, and I thought, you know, I really need to come back to the United States. And for some reason or other I was reading all these different Southern writers, including Pat Conroy, and I thought, and I want to go to the South, so I thought, I'll go to New Orleans, you know, that would be nice if I can find something there, where I would be dead now because I would think, well, I can outride Katrina. And so, but I had a friend who was moving to Mississippi, and he was coming from like Texas or Oklahoma, one of those drier states, and he made it seem so nice and lush that when I was actually offered a job here, because I never would have come if he hadn't been talking about it, because, you know, I grew up with my idea of Mississippi. So I was actually offered a job sight unseen, and over I came, and I've been there. I realized I'll come for a year because it's a job, and but I've been there ever since. My books are situated there.
Yeah, you've been there 11 or 12 years now.
Yeah,
right?
11 years. Yeah.
Well, you have the two novels. The first, and they're both set in a place called Revere.
Right.
Which is too small to be Columbus exactly.
Exactly.
But I locate it between Columbus, Mississippi, and the Alabama border.
Exactly. Yeah, and that 2 inches of space.
Yes, but since it's fictional, it doesn't take up much space.
Right.
The first book must, the Air Between Us must, because it is about a pair of doctors, one black, one white, in this town. You must have made use of your father's life. Your father was a surgeon?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I did. Actually, I had the idea before I wrote the book. And what happened, my brother told me that in the 50s, when my father was, in the 60s and early 70s, I guess it went on to, that we were in Nebraska, or he was in Nebraska, and not many people were prepared to have an African-American surgeon operate on them in Nebraska. This isn't the South. And so what would happen, according to my brother, is that the doctors, this is in the, you know, back in the day.
Omaha.
Right. But doctors would, like, you know, scrub and put their patients under, and then Daddy would come and do the actual surgery. And then, you know, the other doctor would take over. And I heard, you know, at first, in this day and age, it sounds impossible, but back in the day, it was more than possible. So then I had this idea. My agent really liked it. I talked to people in Columbus. I was just moving there, and they would say, not that about this, but first of all, they knew it was called Go Surgery. So you talk to any doctor, you know, over the age of 50, and he knew exactly what you were talking about. Because it wasn't just a racial thing, just all the time, not all the time, but occasionally this would happen where another surgeon would do the actual work.
There'd be a doctor of record.
Right.
And everybody was clustered around the patient. Somebody would somebody would prep, somebody would open.
Right.
But the little tricky part,
yeah, somebody else would do.
Somebody else might do.
Exactly.
There is a character. There are these. It's an interesting collection of pairings in that book. You have the two, the black and white doctor. Each one has a wife. Being a doctor's wife. Being a doctor's wife is a very special profession, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of, looks like a lot of being alone and being stressed in some ways.
Exactly. Not a lot of support in the house, you know. Because he's gone.
If you have children, you're
you're pretty much there. My dad was gone. You know, he worked very hard. He was he'd come home at night at like 8.
Yeah.
And leave very early in the morning. Days would go by, we wouldn't even see him.
Well, the black doctor, the superb surgeon in your novel, Reese Jackson, has a next door neighbor named Melba, and Melba is a creature of indeterminate everything. She is a fortune teller who doesn't really tell fortunes, and she's a woman who may or may not be black or white. If you were describing her in a sentence, how do you see Melba?
Exactly, as you said, because I really wanted to create a character that you couldn't really tell what that character was, or how she was acting, or what she was doing. You couldn't really put her in parameters, and that's what I wanted to do with Melba. My characters come not just full-blown in my head ever. They, you know, it's a lot of rewriting to get them, and I really wanted Melba to come out the way she did, sort of a heroine. And I don't, people will ask me to this day, was Melba black or was she white? And I say, you know, I don't know, really.
Well, if you are involved with the traditional one-drop rule, then she's got the drop, don't you think?
Maybe.
Well, you're the one who knows better than
but
others.
The thing is that just because she's in a, you know, a brothel down in New Orleans, there were a lot of white brothels too. But she was really attracted to black culture. She was, she always wanted to live in the black part of town. But that could be because she felt that she was an outsider and she wanted to be with other outsiders. It could be for a variety of reasons.
She was just cunning, among other things. I like the idea that she doesn't make any pretense of telling the future. She just pays close attention to to what's right in front of her.
Right. And that's how we all tell the future, actually, if we're thinking about it.
Yeah, people would come in and she could tell what was on their minds.
Right.
You use the same place, Revere, but you move it back. You move this in the second book, The Secret of Magic. You move back to December of 1945, and you have Lieutenant Wilson come home. In that first scene, he is a returning, decorated Army officer. He's been in Italy. He's been in battle. He has the Distinguished Service Cross. His friends have been killed right practically in his arms. I think you could say their blood was on him. But he won't give up his seat on the interstate bus, and he's killed.
Right.
This happened around the United States in 45 and 46, this kind of thing.
Right.
Did you have historical precedents in your head for this?
What got me started on this actually was being on a plane to visit my son who lives in San Francisco. He's at Cal Berkeley, but he was in San Francisco, and I'm on the plane. I lived in San Francisco for many years, and I'm on the plane with like a real hippie from the hippie era. And you just have to really, because we all grew out of that, but this guy, he stayed there. And and you just have to respect that. So we were chattering away. I don't think of myself as a talker, but I think I've changed, because we sure did talk all the way from Atlanta to San Francisco. And in the course of this talking, he told me about a friend of his in another state, I can't remember which state it was, maybe Georgia, who his father had been a World War II veteran, was on the way home, and was made to give up his seat for German prisoners of war. I thought to myself, honey, you live in Mississippi. This is bound to have happened. So when I got back home, I started looking, and they said, of course there was a German prisoner of war camp right over in Aliceville, and so I had that. And then I started doing a lot of research on Thurgood Marshall, his early cases, and I came across the Isaac Woodard case, and that was just it then.
I've been searching my brain to see if I could ever remember Thurgood Marshall being a fictional character before, being a character in a novel, and I did not think of one. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
He's such a flamboyant giant. He's a larger-than-life figure, and I don't think anyone's used him before you.
I love him. Well, because my grandfather did.
Yeah.
My grandfather just idolized him. He would read the Kansas City, they were in Kansas City. He'd read the Kansas City Call, and he'd just look up and he'd say, that Thurgood, he sure knows him some law. I mean, he'd say that. I can see him doing it at the breakfast table, in the living room, on the couch, whatever.
Well, the people, Thurgood Marshall is contacted. He sends Regina Robichaud down to Mississippi to investigate. She's just a girl, just graduated from law school, very eager. But there are a couple of things that little almost like verbal triggers that I want you to respond to. One is, everybody in Revere, Mississippi says to her, you don't understand anything. It's not done that way here.
Right.
And the other thing is, everybody knows already the answer. She acts like she's a detective, but the thing that she wants to go find out, half the town already knows.
Right.
What kind of, how does a town get to a point where everybody knows everything, but it doesn't matter? They all know who killed Lieutenant Wilson, but it doesn't matter.
This is the problem. It's the only one that I had with my editor. Whatever she would want, anything, I was, she was very bright, and I was happy to work with that, but she was with everything. But the one I really held firmly on, she said, well, if we know who did it, then where is the mystery? I said, but the South is an oligarchy, and we don't, everybody can know everything. There are mysteries in my hometown that everybody knows, who did it. And it's just that these people rule, and if one of them does something, then, they can get away with that.
They are immune
yeah.
from
Or
regular
had been,
justice,
yeah.
or had been.
Or had been in the 40s,
Right.
yeah.
This is the spring of 46, the summer of
Right.
46, by the time the action's moving along.
Right.
The complication, I mean, you bring this point up half a dozen times in The Secret of Magic. That is, in the North, and by North I mean everywhere outside of the Confederacy, Nebraska, San Francisco, Ohio, wherever. Blacks and whites, presumably there is no segregation, no Jim Crow, but there's no interaction, or little. And what you say in the novel many times is, by God, there may be Jim Crow in Mississippi, but everybody's in it, cheek by jowl, every day, all the time. It's a paradox, don't you think?
I do think that that's true. I can remember, and also the idea that the only, racially unfair things that happened in the South. And violent things too. Because I know, as I say, I had wonderful nuns, but when I have the killing of Regina's father is actually based on a real killing that happened in Omaha, Nebraska, where I grew up, in 1919, where this black man was lynched, and for the same reason that Regina's father, for no reason. And I never heard a word about it. I never heard a word about that growing up. But I heard everything about what was happening in Mississippi.
Mississippi lacked public relations.
Well, it was also, this wasn't, the history is what it is. But other things were going on as well in other parts of the country. I never heard until I was an adult about the huge racial riots all through the North in 1919 after the First World War.
Right.
We just aren't told those things. And it could also be because, things were really at the moment of change when Mississippi was going through all this. And so that's where we were focused with the Civil Rights Act, with voting rights. Our focus was right here.
Well, as Thurgood Marshall says, it's the law that needs to be changed.
Oh, yeah.
The laws were already okay in Connecticut, but the laws were not okay in Alabama and Mississippi.
No.
You make use of a device in The Secret of Magic. The grande dame of Revere, Miss Calhoun, has written a children's book called The Secret of Magic. And you weave her book about these children playing in a kind of magic forest with the present tense. Some of the characters are the same people. It's a very complicated device you've got there, and I'm curious about, why you thought you wanted to make a weaving of that intricacy in your novel. You didn't have to. You had a narrative.
Well, I used that. It was like doing the book was a layered thing, and it was deeply into the edits with my editor that I had used a scene that I felt was crucial with these children from the first book. And she said, well, if you're going to use that, she agreed with that, but she said, you're going to have to foreshadow this all through. So I had to go back and put it all in. But the book was really important to Regina, which is why she really fought to come down, because it was the first book that she'd ever read in the 20s. In the 30s, when she was a young girl, she had her father killed, and her mother very much an activist, so away a great deal. So she read a lot, and it was the first one that had an African-American child as a protagonist.
And the horror of the book, the reason it gets banned in Mississippi is that the black children and the white children play together, and the black, not only do they play together amiably, but the black child is quite a courageous and resourceful little person.
Right, which is what I've heard too. That black children and white children played together in towns as small until they were about at puberty, about the age of 10, which was another shock to people who don't grow up here.
We only have a minute, but I want to find out. I heard from our little bits of conversation that you're writing a ghost story.
Yes.
Can you tell me in a minute what you're up to?
I would like, it's tentatively entitled Washington and Lee, and it's a modern ghost story. Since ghosts are all over Mississippi and houses and stuff, I really wanted to go a little bit deeper into that to do.
And are the ghosts real ghosts, or are they just phantasms of somebody's overheated imagination?
Can they be both? That's what they are.
Well, they're both.
They're both, yeah.
Oh, that's
There's one ghost.
How far along are you with this? When should your readers be looking for it?
In a couple of years. It takes me a while.
It takes a while. Yes, it does. Well, when it does, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
And I hope we can sit down and talk again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been a real pleasure.
It.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To order this season of Bookmark on DVD, call 1-800-463-8825. Additional information can be found on our website at www.alabamatv.org.